And now, ladies and gentlemen, it's time for Jonesin' with Jeff Drake.
Hey kids, it's Jonesing with Jeff Drake. I'm the host, Jeff Drake, and that was my studio audience just losing their minds like they usually do. Welcome to the Cowboy episode. Today it's our Cowboy episode. Ryan told me he's going to wear a fancy cowboy shirt, so we decided to make it a cowboy show, cowboy episode. I'm glad you're all here to share it with us. And so my guest today is Ryan Lopez-Love, and I've been in contact with Ryan for a couple of years now, I think. We sort of ran into each other on Facebook. Ryan's a storyteller primarily, a historian, comedian. He's a content creator. He makes videos, all kinds of great stuff. I first started noticing him because I just noticed the stuff he posted about his family, just made them sound like they had so much fun. His kids were such characters. I wanted to know everything they did, and I just couldn't wait till he posts them again because his kids make me laugh. I think they're really funny. Anyway, so Ryan's been doing this for a while. He was on this show, The Young Turks. I guess someone we don't talk about politics here, but I guess somebody in the Biden administration shared one of his videos. And what was the other thing? I don't remember. Anyway, so we're going to talk about all that kind of stuff with Ryan Lopez-Love today. And welcome to the show, Ryan.
Hey, thanks for having me, Jeff. I'm glad to be here. How you doing today?
It's really good to have you and your mustache here. I wanted to talk to you about your mustache. You know, online, you're sort of known as the mustache. How long have you and your mustache been together, and how did you make such a thick, luxurious trademark mustache?
Well, sir, so during the pandemic, I was wearing a mask at work, and I decided not to shave. And it's not much of a story, but by the time the pandemic was over, I had a beard, and I shaved it off and kept the mustache, and I've had one ever since. Pretty much.
Okay, so you decide to keep it. It works for you. Like I said, it's sort of your trademark
Absolutely.
now. You're known as the mustache. That's really cool. A while back, I don't know, maybe a month or two ago, you made a little Instagram thing about me. And I was shocked. You said you got 67,000 views. That's incredible. Why don't you talk about that?
Yeah, so on all platforms, it has over 100,000 views, and it's a video about you. And so, primarily, what I want to do with my platform is I actually want to help artists, right? And I've seen a lot. We're coming out of a time when a lot of artists were thrown away, even for like trivial things, right? You can see it right now with artists like Laura Jane Grace, who's the singer for the band Against Me. And people are coming after her for, like a failed marriage, something as simple as that. And I kind of feel like, like in our community, we have restorative justice, and artists are the focal point of our community. So us as content creators should be promoting these artists and things like that. And I thought it was really powerful and inspiring the way that you had leaned into the fact that you had robbed a bank, because I know that you had suffered some ostracization because of that as an artist after getting out of jail, but you leaned into it, right? And we're in a weird cultural time where people were throwing away people in punk bands and for trivial things like just having bad marriages or whatever, right? And so I think that what the content creator is, especially like in our community, should be a little different. I think that maybe we should have some historians, and we should have people that are willing to defend our community.
Okay. Well, you talk about me leaning into the bank robbery thing. I was sitting in prison and I thought, I got to make this work for me because it wasn't I mean, it kind of saved my life being away for a while like that because my drug habit was so bad and I needed some time to sort of get away and clean out and all that. But, that's kind of a stigma, being a convicted felon and doing prison time and stuff. And I thought, you know what?
Yeah.
I can't let this ruin my life. I've got to make it work for me. And, thankfully for me, some people think that's interesting. I don't know, but
Yeah.
you've
So
got some. Go ahead.
for me though, for me though, I'm not a felon. I was a homeless kid, and in Southern California, I was a runaway,
There's still time to be a
and my
felon, Brian. There's still time.
yeah, yeah, no, I've steered clear, and I'm grateful for it. But you know, I think I'm an intelligent person, and when I've tried to accomplish things in my life, I've had a lot of trouble because people will say, "Well, why don't you tell them who you really are?" You know what I mean? You're a mentally ill, homeless kid,
That's
punk
nobody's
rocker from
business.
Southern. Yeah, right. So um I decided to start telling people who I really am, and people are connecting with it in a way that was unexpected for me. And I leaned into who I really am. And I took a cue from people like you. And that's why I decided to make the video about you. And so,
Well, thanks, Ryan. I appreciate you spending the time to make something about me. I'm glad you think it's interesting or whatever. You've got some pretty varied interest. I've seen you've made some videos about wrestling, pro wrestling, and Mormonism. We don't really talk about religion on this show because I don't want to offend anybody talking about their religion. I don't mind offending people, but not necessarily about their religion because that's kind of a personal thing, and everybody's entitled to believe whatever they want. So I'm not gonna make fun of somebody make fun of because of their religious beliefs.
you can, because I don't have any connection to Mormonism, so that would be fine. And punk rock has been my refuge from religion. I suffered abuse in religion, and as a child, and when I tried to go back as a young adult, and ultimately it has been punk rock that was my refuge, and I have no problem talking about that.
Well, that was the third sort of the triptych I was going to mention. Is there's pro wrestling, Mormonism, and punk rock. And really, when I see the things you post about Mormonism, it's more like sort of the history of the church, the offshoots, things like that.
Right.
Especially the offshoots, right? That's something that really interests you. The different branches or I don't know enough
Right.
about it to really talk intelligently. Then punk rock, and I gotta say, like I said, I try to avoid talking about religion, but the fact that you were abused in the name of religion, to me, that just is so wrong. And I'm not, like I said, I'm not going to pass judgment on any church or anything, but the people that use religion to abuse others or manipulate others or gain riches or whatever, that's really not what it's supposed to all be about. But again, we don't talk about that here. So punk rock kind of saved your life, huh? You found what, a community of other misfits like the kids on Donkey Island, like on Pinocchio, or what was that like?
Yeah, so, I remember just being a 12-year-old kid. And okay, so when I was little, the first thing I ever liked was the Beach Boys. I dug the Beach Boys when I was like a 5-year-old kid. My brother brought home Suicidal Tendencies and Minor Threat on each side of a cassette, and I didn't connect with it right away. I thought it was like his friends' bands from down the street, right? I'd learned to later in a big way, but the thing that got me into punk rock was like listening to the Ramones do You Want to Dance, and their funny songs like Now I Want to Sniff Some Glue or whatever. So the humor kind of brought me in, the sense of community, of camaraderie, and I felt that in a really big way, especially in my early teens, becoming a runaway. And I had to make a lot of videos about a friend I had when I was a teenager named Josh. And when we talk about the camaraderie and we talk about the community, this is the guy who grew up in a broken home, and he had a place to stay at this time when I was a runaway, but he ran away to sleep in the dirt with me, right, to show me how to do it. And that's what I've experienced as a member of this community.
I always ask everybody that sort of connected with this kind of, I don't know if you call it underground music, punk rock, however you Joneses, whatever, how they were first exposed to it. You were exposed to it by an older brother, right? You just said some stuff from like, I think you're really lucky that when you're younger than I am, when you came up,
Mhm.
punk rock was sort of already this thing. When I got into it, it was very new. And people sort of treated us like we were the devil's spawn, like, oh, punk rockers, they spit and they throw up and they say they curse and they're dirty and probably criminals. But by the time you came up, there wasn't as much of, I mean, there's still people, you walk around with a mohawk on, people are going to look at you and make whatever judgments. But it's a little different now. Like I went to Disneyland one time, must have been about 1980, and Disneyland used to not let you in if you were dressed punk rock. So I dressed as normal as I could, and kids were still yelling "whip it" at me as I walked by. That really doesn't happen anymore.
No, so I can talk a little bit about that. So the whole like yelling Devo at us was going on a little bit by the mid '90s, but it was mostly dying out. So our whole generation, I think, got into it because of Green Day and the Offspring. No matter what you think about pop punk is the reason that there's a whole generation of people in Southern California that know who like you are, like who know who the Misfits are, and it allowed us to go back, right? So when bands like Green Day and then the Offspring were from Southern California, um, happened, people wanted more of that, right? And there was 20 years of it just sitting there. And so we could go back and listen to like old Social Distortion records and everything Rick Agnew was involved in and and all of that stuff. And that was just something that we really rallied around. And we always wanted to find new groups that were sort of like that. And when we were walking down the street, even at that time, if you saw somebody that had like a like a mohawk or whatever, you would like hop out of your mom's car if you were 14 years old because you wanted to go talk to him because that was a rare kind of person um, to to see. So there really it really was a smaller community, and we got really excited when we saw people that were like us. But there was also a sense where we didn't feel like what we were doing was legitimate because there was this whole other like generation before that had happened, and we were still getting like the guys hopping out of trucks and like whooping our asses and stuff. Like I had my share of that, but there was also this other weird phenomenon of like the abusive older punk rocker, like where it happened to him. So he was gonna do it to you, and he saw you walking down the street, call you Devo, and he's wearing like a I don't know Shattered Faith T-shirt or something. So yeah, it was a lot different, Jeff.
Yeah, you reminded me of a story when I got out of high school up in Merced, California. I drove down to LA and I was living with my grandma, and I had this job at this Mervyn's department store selling shoes. And every day after work, I would drive. There was this Tasty Freeze on Beach Boulevard where they used to make these chocolate banana milkshakes that I loved. And one day I was sitting there drinking my chocolate banana milkshake, and there was this car, a couple cars down, they were blasting Sid Vicious singing My Way. And this is 1979. So it was still like, when you saw like other punk rockers or whatever, you're like, ah. So I went up to the car and like, hey man, Sid Vicious, that's great. Yeah. And the guy looked at me like, what? Just get away from me, okay? But I know what you mean about, you see people and you're like, hey, that looks like one of my people that I could sort of,
Right.
maybe I could hang out with him. He didn't want me to hang out with him though.
No, no, no. We get that. We come on a little too strong sometimes. Yeah, yeah. So
So what about the pro wrestling?
all right. So during the pandemic, there was nothing on, there was nothing to do. And my wife and I started watching pro wrestling. We could watch it 6, 7 nights a week. They were filming it without an audience. We could follow the storylines. I hadn't watched it since I was a kid with like when like Hogan, Macho Man, Dusty Rhodes, Roddy Piper, my favorite.
I love Roddy
And
Piper.
oh yeah.
Piper's Pit.
And getting a little blood flow talking about him. So we start watching it because it's something to do. And I wanted friends to talk to about wrestling with. So I went on TikTok and started making these silly, funny videos about pro wrestling. And I was just started talking about politics through the lens of professional wrestling after a while because it's just where I gravitated to. And almost immediately, like the subjects of my videos were sharing my videos, or people were trying to give me dirt on pro wrestlers that were like working with them, and I wasn't interested in that. That wasn't what was interesting to me. And so what I was really doing was, I was talking about politics through the lens of pro wrestling, and people from the White House started sharing my stuff. The actor Dave Batista, I started seeing my stuff on podcasts, and it was a strange thing to me because I had one social media platform. I didn't really know how to use it, and people thought it was interesting, and it was getting like millions of views, and I didn't know how to market that. And I was just sort of like making fun of politicians, making fun of pro wrestlers. And what would end up happening is after a little while, I would get a lot of success. So I was on there for maybe 2 months. I had 25,000 followers, and like news or like news sites are sharing my stuff, and I just wasn't ready for it. And I crashed really hard, and I just thought, I'm just doing this because of my ego. And I'm not doing this for any kind of monetary reason. And it's just more trouble than it's worth. I don't want to be criticized on the internet. And I ran away, and I deleted my account. And this kept happening. Like I would get off for a year, and then I'd get back on, and then the same thing. Uh, People were supporting me who had a lot of talent. People with really large followings were supporting me, and they were like, "We don't understand what's going on with you. Like, why is this happening?" And this last year, I had a really bad crash out, and I've always associated these feelings with um, like I feel bad, so I must be bad in some sort of way, right? And so when I have these downs, I really internalize them, and I go and I close all my friends off, and I go and I'm by myself. And so if I have any projects, I was pissing those away, and the doctor told me I was bipolar, and it was a
Like
freeing
manic
thing for.
depressive? I mean, I'm genuinely asking. Is that similar to manic
Yeah,
depressive?
it's manic depressive. It's the same thing.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'm a manic depressive, right? And um, when I learned about it, it, it changed everything. I didn't feel any more guilt because I didn't have a reason to. I realized I didn't have a reason to. I was just looking for things to feel less, like reasons to feel less than. And it was just, it was a mood, it was a general mood. And I did medications for a little while, and I just wasn't creative. And I was working with a doctor, and he suggested that I could get off of my medications and we could work together. So that's where we're at right now, and I'm finding some success. I've had ups and I've had downs, and I'm doing my projects, and I feel a lot more successful than I've ever felt, even though my following is much smaller. And that's because I'm making content that has to do with that's authentic to who I am, and I'm helping others. And so I'm a lot happier right now than I've probably been since I was a kid.
Well, good. Nothing wrong with being happy. But I did want to talk about pro wrestling a little bit more.
Okay.
When I was a little kid, my grandma used to watch pro wrestling in the 60s and 70s, and it was kind of ridiculous. I mean, even as a kid, I thought it was kind of ridiculous. Very small crowds. They would film it at like the sports arena in LA. And I don't remember the names of any of maybe Gorgeous George or something like that. Anyway,
Mhm.
and that was through the 60s and 70s. And then when I was already in the Joneses, must have been about 1983 or so. One of our roadies, in fact, our first roadie, Ed Colgan, was a wrestling fan. And we went to a wrestling thing at the sports arena here now. I think it was like Superfly Snuka, Junkyard Dog, the Tonga Kid. I don't know if you remember any of those names.
Yeah,
Unfortunately,
all of them.
Roddy Piper wasn't there. But this was right when sort of Cyndi Lauper and Captain Lou Albano, and it sort of exploded. It became this big cultural thing. And I think they're still sort of riding that wave. I mean, it never went away after that, because before that, pro wrestling was like this sort of small regional deal. Like I said, very small crowds, sort of really crappy production in the televised matches and stuff. And then it became huge, like you said, with like Hulk Hogan and Roddy Piper, and later the Macho Man guy and all that stuff. Have you been to any wrestling events like live?
I have. And so, yeah, wrestling started in the carnivals, and the way that it was run for a long time was sort of like the mafia in territories. So, somebody would own a territory in New York, somebody would own a territory in Los Angeles, and you'd have somebody in Georgia, and they stayed in their area, right? Like the mafia. And they'd get together, and when there were like outlaw promotions, is what they called them, promotions that didn't have permission to exist in that area, then they would get together and try to move those guys out. And it was Vince McMahon who Jr. who bought the WWE in New York, which was the territory for New York, from his father for $1 million. And it was his idea to expand it and to put the other territories out of business and to turn the WWE into a national organization.
Wow.
So he did that by bringing in Cyndi Lauper and just bringing in the top stars of each territory, and buying other territories using various methods of thuggery to put them in business. But yeah, I've been to many wrestling. I continue to be a pro wrestling fan.
So you're like a scholar of like wrestling history, it sounds like. I mean, you know a lot more than I even thought there was to know.
Yeah, of the things I'm interested in, I tend to know quite a bit. Yeah,
Is that
you can
part
learn a lot about life from pro wrestling. How to enter a room, for example.
do you I mean, so do you have kind of an obsessive nature when you find something interesting? You just really get into it. Do you think that's part of your bipolarism, or what do you attribute that to?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I can become really obsessive when it comes to a subject, and I'll delve into it and learn everything there is to learn about it. 100%, 100%. There's no way to go into that in depth, but for sure.
Okay. And the pro wrestling events that I went to at the sports arena here in LA were wild. I mean, people were throwing beers at each other, fights were breaking out in the stands. I mean, those people are passionate about this stuff. And the wrestlers are hitting each other with metal chairs, and it's like mayhem breaking out. And I think most people realize a lot of the action in the ring is scripted. I mean, the guys still, they suffer a lot of punishment in there because there's no way you can fly around and land like that. I mean, you can learn how to do it to lessen the injuries, but so many of them die young from, I guess just getting beat up so much, or maybe they're using steroids, or I'm not sure what was causing it, but it seems like a lot of those guys die really young.
Yeah, so it's hard living. A lot of injuries. I mean, you can fall on something with springs on it, but you're still falling on it, 4,000 times in a year or whatever. And they get into anything they can to ease the pain, and they for sure use steroids, no matter what the WWE is telling you. And
Well, even baseball players, steroids.
so yeah, so and you were talking a little bit about how passionate people are about pro wrestling, and I covered I did election content. I was making quite a bit of money doing election content, and I did pro wrestling content. I've protested Scientology, but I've never gotten more harassment than just making wrestling videos from wrestling fans. Yeah.
Wow. What would people say to you? Like, hey, you dirty, you talked bad about
Oh
my
no,
hero.
they'll threaten to kill you. I mean, I'm bipolar, so when I protested Scientology, I was looking for them outside the house. I'm paranoid.
They were
They
probably
weren't
there.
there though.
Scientology, they
Yeah.
were
Oh, well, the wrestling fans. No, so I'm a lot more worried about wrestling fans than I am Scientologists. I'll
really,
tell you.
wow, that's scary.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Wow. That's incredible. So you didn't have Scientology people going through your trash or taking pictures or anything like that?
Not that I'm aware of. If they were, it was very quiet, and I thank them for that.
I worked for a couple businesses here in LA that were run by Scientologists, and I was one of the only non-Scientologists there. One was a chimney sweeping company, and the other one, I think we were selling tickets to like police functions or I don't know, something like that. And they have
Yeah,
their own
they have. Yeah, they have a relationship with the LAPD. So they actually have a camera on their on top of their huge building there in Hollywood.
the blue one.
And yeah, yeah. So they can see anything on that camera within like a mile radius. So like if there's ever any crimes or whatever, LAPD will go there and give them the footage. So they actually have they have a relationship with LAPD, and they'll work Scientology events and stuff like that. And if there's protesters, they typically will side with Scientology.
Yeah, because we used to call people and ask for donations and also sell tickets to like these events that the police would put on where they show off their equipment and their cars and stuff, and they have people come and meet the cops and stuff. And yeah, we would call people and ask for money and sell these tickets. The other place like
Yeah,
it was a chimney sweeping company, but they've got their own sort of jargon and language. And at first, it would kind of throw. I mean, I learned it a little bit. I don't use it, but I had I had to just to know what my boss was talking about because he'd say, "Oh, clear this," and actually at one point I was a salesman. I was selling chimney rebuilds after the Northridge earthquake, and the guy is like, he called me into his office, as the owner of the company. He's like, you sell a lot of chimney rebuilds, but you're not a part of the church. We don't know how you're doing it, but we think you need to take these courses, and it would just make you so much better. And I didn't, and they fired me.
yeah. You didn't want to give their money all their church all your money, and so they had to get rid of you.
You know,
Yeah, I mean, they go after people who they think are vulnerable, and if you're not vulnerable, they have no use for you, right? And so that's why I had an issue with Scientology, is because they prey on people like me. You're a homeless kid one minute, and then the next minute you've signed a contract for 1 billion years to go walk up and down Hollywood Boulevard in a vest that's too tight for $50 a week.
yeah, you're part of the
So
C crew or whatever they call it.
yeah.
Yeah, it's I don't know. I like I said, I don't really talk about religion on this show, and I guess Scientology probably qualifies. I don't know. I know a little bit about their history, L. Ron Hubbard, stuff like that, the poker game, and the science fiction. I know a little bit about that, but anyway,
Right.
yeah, it was a whole new world to me. And there's a lot of Scientologists. It seems like in LA, sort of in the entertainment, especially actors. A
Yeah.
lot of the people that worked at that company were aspiring actors, and they would hang out at the Celebrity Center, and I would overhear their conversations. I'm like, is that English? I don't know what they're saying. But anyway, it was really interesting. I was glad to get out of there though. I probably should not.
Yeah.
You should probably talk about
So,
something else. I'll probably be
well, I
all
mean,
in my house.
I think we can though, because the germs wouldn't exist, I don't think, without Scientology. The whole idea that the circle is like a religious symbol or like a fascist symbol, right? And Darby Crash gets involved, gets interested in that stuff because of the high school that he went to, that was taken over by a group, EST, which was an offshoot of Scientology.
Werner
Uh,
Erhard, right? EST, later.
yeah, and
Yeah,
so
my
yeah,
dad.
I'm not really.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
so there's a lot of Scientology in there. So that's why he gets involved. That's why he gets interested in cults, and so that's why we get the germs, And so it is part of the early LA punk rock story.
Okay. Well, I mean, he was also a heroin addict and a homosexual, so there's a lot of stuff going on with Darby. Right?
Yeah, well,
Am I right?
you've got the heroin addict part down, and I've got the homosexual part down. So
It's the mustache, the push broom mustache. Sorry, I don't mean to insult your mustache. It's a big part of you.
that's not. It's not insulting to call me a homosexual.
It's not, but
No. No, I think that I mean, I think that I mean, I'm bisexual, so I don't think that's like a like an issue to call me a homosexual.
you can do whoever you
Yeah.
want. Like I said at the beginning, one of the things I loved about watching your Facebook postings was so much fun that your family had and your kids. And you told me your kids were like lawyers and comedians. And they do seem like characters. You don't have to say their names or anything because I don't want people doxing you or coming after your
Yeah.
kids. But they seem like they're hilarious. And it seems like you guys have a really good time.
Yeah, I mean, I don't I'm not an authoritarian parent, and I think that that helps. I think that them knowing that they can make fun of me leads for a good relationship. And I think that my kids are hilarious because they can get away with anything if it's funny. So I mean that's kind of my motto. If they make fun of me and the joke is good enough, then I'll let it slide.
That's so foreign to me compared to my upbringing. My dad was actually an admirer of Adolf Hitler and would say things like, it's too bad he didn't finish the job and just, horrible stuff. And if I ever made fun of my dad, I probably wouldn't be here today. I mean, he didn't even need an excuse to beat me up. But had I mocked him, or even if
Yeah.
it was funny, and he had a pretty good sense of humor, but for a Nazi. But man, I just can't even imagine that. I mean, I used to get my mouth
Yeah.
washed out with soap. They would stick a bar of soap in my mouth, and for way less than making fun of my parents, I would never even consider doing that.
So I grew up in an abusive household as well, and with a father with a very frail ego, and so I know what that's like, and I think that maybe some of my parenting is even reactive to that. I don't want to create children that have some of the problems that I had, and I know what the recipe is to get that. So I think it's really an easy thing for me to to avoid through just being a little patient with them and all that stuff. And parenting's not that hard as long as you're not an asshole. It's really
That's a big, not an asshole.
yeah,
So many people, they'd be okay if they weren't an asshole. But
right.
yeah, I'm really sorry you had to go through a childhood like that. I mean,
You
but
too.
my childhood wasn't the happiest either. I can't say I was abused. There was maybe some abusive behavior, but I didn't ever feel abused. But without all that, we wouldn't be where we are, who we are today. I mean, it all makes up part of you, and not everybody gets to have a happy childhood and a happily forever after. Got to kind of play with the hand you're dealt, and you can either make a dog's breakfast of it or not. That's just, I guess you make your choice. It was kind of like me with the bank robbery. I could either just like wear it like an albatross around my neck the rest of my life, or maybe not celebrate it, but not run away from it.
Yeah, I'm not I have no albatross, right? I'm going to be my authentic self, and I'm going to continue to be my authentic self, and I continue to look for inspiration from other people in our community. But yeah.
So, Ryan, what do you got coming up? I mean, I know there's that one thing we can't talk about that I let out of the
So
bag earlier, but what else you got that you can't talk about?
So
Anything else?
I've got a project coming up. A company contacted me asking me, they asked me to pitch them something, and I have a good idea. I'll let you know about that shortly. And I have a few other projects. I have a podcast coming out called Punk Rock Trash, and you're going to be my first guest on the Punk Rock Trash podcast. Jeff was nice enough to let me use one of his songs, "Criminals in My Car," as my intro to my podcast.
First song I ever wrote.
And what's that? First song?
First song I ever wrote.
Oh, the lyrics are so good. The lyrics are so good.
When I had Mandy on the show, Amanda Brixtola, and I told her that I think that first line of that song is the best line that I've ever written. Got to go to Rome, spit on the Pope. It's like the most punk rock thing I could think of, and
Yeah.
all downhill from there. Never got
End of the world and I can't cope.
into the world, and I can't go. I want
That's how we all feel right now, baby.
the Vatican Choir and play no rock and roll.
Yeah.
Anyway, we don't have to sing Criminals.
We don't.
People say, Jeff, please don't. So anything that you got coming up that you said Punk Rock Trash, anything else that the viewers, I mean, you've got a lot of content on Instagram and
Yeah, so follow me on Instagram. I'm on Instagram and TikTok, but follow me on Instagram. I'm the real Ryan Love on both platforms, and I make a lot of content about me growing up as a homeless kid in Southern California. I talk a lot about the punk rock bands that I grew up listening to, and I tell their stories to help contextualize my own. So if that sounds like something that's interesting to you, go ahead and give me a follow.
I think you should. Ryan's an interesting guy. And like I said, I just enjoy most of all just following your family and your antics. And like I said, your kids are such characters. Now, you said you were homeless. Were you actually living on the street? Did you stay with friends? How did you manage that when you were a teenager? Or was it
So
were you even younger than that?
No, so I was a teenager. I lived various places. I started running away when I was 14, and the first place that I had moved to was a bridge that was no more than a mile from my parents' house. And the reason is because
Did they
I
come
didn't
looking
want
for
to.
you, or did they just let you go? Were they happy you were
No,
gone?
I mean, they depends
Children
on
as
who you
kids,
ask.
go be a freak somewhere else.
Yeah, there was an element of that. So, I had a father who he was convinced I was gay. Like I was kind of ostracized for I
Yeah,
always had
people
girls
thought I was
around.
gay
What's the
too, and I was like,
problem?
"Have you ever seen me having sex with a guy? Why do you think I'm gay? What is it?"
Yeah, this girls too. I we go to we so I moved to a bridge that's less than a mile from my parents' house initially, and we had nothing but bushes was our cover from the street. So we kind of would go down, and then we cut this hole out in the middle of the bushes, and we had blankets laid down and stuff like that, and that's where we lived. It was also not too far from our high school, so like we weren't going to high school, and like we could hear the other kids walking past, like walking down the sidewalk of the bridge. And we were just yards away while we were waking up, and they were going to school and stuff, and we'd like start drinking or panhandling or something, and go over to the supermarket there in Artesia and start doing, or we'd look for like the older winos, right? They were a good resource too. You could go panhandle with them, and you'd split up, and everybody would go panhandle in different corners of the parking lot, and you'd come together, and everybody would get a bottle, and it would be like a communal thing. Like your bottle would only last about like less than 10 minutes. Like it, might even be like a 40-ounce beer even, and you're sharing it 6 ways, and then you split up and you go do it again. You do that all day, and
So
it's a communal thing. What's that?
you didn't just run away from home; you dropped out of school. Sounds like.
Yeah, I was a complete dropout. I wasn't doing anything. And then when things would get too rough, I didn't like sleeping in the dirt. So I'd find somebody to go live with. For a while, it was my friend who essentially was kind of raised in a flop house, and the situation there was left something to be desired for the kind of, I was a lot luckier than him. He grew up in a really bad situation. I had a girlfriend. I did what we all do, right? I found a rich girl, Jeff, and
I've never done that. Never been that lucky.
you've never done that.
Not a rich.
So you're a musician and you've never found a rich girl, Jeff? Come
Not
on,
rich enough for my tastes. My habits are pretty expensive.
they gotta go. They didn't have enough money, so they had to go, Jeff. So her stepdad owned a hotel in Artesia, and I lived there off and on. And as much as I could until I started stealing TVs and I was selling the hotel's TVs. And so I was there for a couple of years, and I slept everywhere from the top of a Taco Bell in Huntington Beach, and but you learn not to be homeless in Huntington Beach or in Orange County because
Cops and
the
Huntington
police are
Beach,
fucking the police are horrible. Yeah,
especially if you
yeah, and
they used to have this punk
yeah,
rock style.
yeah, they just beat the fuck out of you when they see you, the cops.
Yeah.
So, so you kind of keep it in LA County and try to be as invisible as possible. And when things would get too hard and the street was harder than home, then I would go home until that became too much to manage and that became too difficult again, which was hardly any time at all. But I would end up going home and toughing it out, and
Your parents
because
would
I knew
accept
I
you
needed.
back.
What's that?
Your parents would accept you back. I guess they had to legally, right?
They kind of had to. There was a time when there was a couple times when I went back, and my dad was a tweaker. My dad was a tweaker who had he always made a good living, so nobody knew he was a tweaker. He was always working in his garage, and so he would be there to intercept me when I would try to come home at night. And he'd do something like put his finger in my chest and tell me he had only one son, and
It wasn't
so
you?
it'd be, oh, it was not me. In
My dad
fact,
told me that
it
was the
was.
biggest disappointment in his life. That was kind of hard to take.
My brother had red hair. I don't know why he chose him. So it was back to the bridge, right? And so there was a lot of that. And I remember one time I was in the back of my friend's mom's van, and her boyfriend was shooting speed, and it was the first time that she ever had. And I know that because I had to pretend to be asleep to be in the van and not be cold and outside, and they're having a whole conversation about how she had never shot speed before.
Oh boy.
And I'm sitting there like listening to this as like a 14-year-old kid or whatever, and just knowing that like this is the kind of life that my best friend at the time was having. And so there was certainly some experiences to be had.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like I said, I'm sorry you had to go through all that, but that's what sort of made you what you are today, and you're not so bad.
Yeah.
Anyway, Ryan, we got to wrap this up. It's been great having you on the show. I just saw you, what was it, a week or so ago at the Joneses show. That was a lot of fun. But good luck with all your stuff, and I know you've got that big thing coming up that we couldn't talk about, and good luck with that. I think you'll
Yeah.
be
So there should also be a Jones's Instagram up and running shortly too, within the next week. So go ahead and check that out. And I'm going to be an admin for that for a while. And so let's go ahead and follow that and promote that page. And that's it.
great. Thanks again, Ryan. It's been a lot of fun. Probably have you on again sometime at some point. And good luck with everything that you're doing and your family and everything. And carry on, buddy.
Thanks for having me, Jeff. You have a good rest of your day.
It's been my pleasure. You too. I'll talk to you
All
after
right.
we're done. But bye, everybody.
Bye.